When it became obvious to me that I was going to retire from the Navy, I said, okay, let me see what I could do. So I always had in mind that I wanted to do something in business. I didn't know what, I didn't know where. Well, the culture here is totally different. I really enjoy the culture here. The people are much more friendly and focused. The things that we do, the values, the things we've done as a leadership team. Well, the first thing we do is we take care of our people, right? And so we in anticipation of the storm actually hitting them, we give them time to prep for that storm. What I love about this company is we focus on the people, the individual. And if we're turning that DC that fast, the place is going to fly. And so the DCs are making great strides right now towards that goal.
You moved to Florida when you were how old?
I was kindergarten, first and second grade in Florida. Then we moved back to Cincinnati and then came back to Florida when I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay.
So back and forth between Cincinnati and Largo, Florida.
Okay.
Same houses too.
All right. Very cool. What high school did you go to?
I went to Seminole High School here in Florida, in Largo, and I went to McNicholas High School for my freshman and sophomore year in Cincinnati.
Okay.
It's a small private Catholic school in Cincinnati.
Very cool. What was your high school experience like?
It was two different high school experiences, right? The first one, which was in Cincinnati, I was an athlete. I was on the golf team, and I played basketball. I was a starting center on the basketball team, right? At 6'1", I was a starting center. And and I was a decent student at the time. Then we moved to Florida after my sophomore year. I tried out for the golf team. I wasn't anywhere near as good as the players down here. I said, okay, I'll focus on basketball. I walked in the gym and I was 6'1", and this the coach goes,
the point guard
what
was
position
6'1".
do you play? And I said, well, I did play center, but I'm looking at everybody else. And he goes, yeah, you're a guard here. So that was the end of my athletic career. And so then my whole life kind of changed. I got into fishing and I got into cars and sports and stuff. And I barely graduated high school from Seminole. So I actually, funny story is I had to go check the list in the back of the auditorium at graduation to make sure I was graduating. So I needed to pass that algebra class in order to get there. And luckily my name was on it. And so I didn't have to embarrass myself in front of my family who came to graduation. So
what was your mindset like in high school? What in terms of the academic side of things?
I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
I just was there. It just wasn't interested. My mom and dad were divorced when I was in 11, and so my mom and my three sisters and two sisters and my brother, we kind of were on our own and doing our own thing, and so I didn't focus on schoolwork. I just did what I had to do, enjoyed myself, had a good time. I loved Florida. It was a great, easygoing lifestyle. I did not what I wanted, but I didn't put a whole lot of pressure on myself back then.
Yeah.
Right. And then at some point I decided I got to do something. So that's when I started thinking about going in the military.
And when was that?
That was probably 2 years after graduation. So my educational background at this point is not very good. After graduating from high school, I went to St. Pete Junior College at the time. I think it's now called St. Pete College, but St. Pete Junior College. Went there for 2 years and got 13 credit hours out of it. Okay. So again, I did what I wanted. I didn't go to class and everything. And I knew I wasn't going anywhere as far as that was concerned. I was trying to get on full-time at Publix. I was working at Publix, and they wanted me to move all the way to Lakeland. I was like,
Corporate office?
No, just a store. I was working like in the produce department. I was going to be assistant manager of a produce department in Lakeland, and I didn't want to do that. And so I started looking around. I said, maybe I should join that. And I liked flying. I had been flying since I was a young kid. I first soloed an airplane when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
So that
legally?
Legally.
Okay.
Yeah. I was taking flying lessons and everything. So flew the plane by myself, and that was pretty exciting. But I always had that love for airplanes and stuff. So I said, well, let me check out the Air Force. I knew I wouldn't be a pilot, but I thought maybe I could do something. And, they didn't have a whole lot. At that time, a lot of folks were going in, and you kind of took what they gave you. You didn't have a whole lot of choices. So I somehow ended up becoming a medical technician in the Air Force.
So looking back at high school, any regrets? Would you have changed anything up?
It definitely set me back. It took me a while to get my feet on the ground and kind of get my career and my life moving forward. But I enjoyed it. I was, like I said, I was chill. I grew up chill, and I loved going fishing. We go fishing all times of the day and night, wake up in the middle of the night, go fishing, leave school, go fishing. So we were just living the dream for a little while, and then the dream got a little stale.
Yeah, it feels like everything happens for a reason. Everything is in alignment when it should be and how it should be. And I think for
Absolutely.
non-regret is a powerful thing to practice. I practice it myself, and I try to as much as possible. And it's just, I think you just recognize that there's a bigger plan that takes you to where you are today. And sometimes you can't totally understand all of it, but things seem to work out for how they should.
You're spot on, and I think that's kind of how because of that, I think that's how my life is kind of morphed, right? I never really planned all the steps that I've taken. They kind of presented themselves, and I would recognize the opportunity and take it, right? I had no intention of coming to Florida when I came to Bealls, but eventually, but the opportunity presented itself, and I felt like I was being led, and said, this seems like a unique I was not looking at all. And the recruiter calls me up and says, hey, I got this great opportunity. And it was near my old hometown, right in Florida. I was like, well, this seems like synergy. So
Yep, for sure.
Took the step.
Oh, cool, very good. So talk to me about the Air Force, and before we continue on your path, what was it like?
It was an eye opener, right? I showed up at boot camp on December 7th, right? So shortly before Christmas, and it was my first time really away from home. Excuse me. And so it was, boot camp was on December 7th. That was kind of the eye-opening shock. It wasn't very strenuous or anything like that. This was the Air Force, right? So they're not all about the push-ups and all that stuff. But went to medical technician school in Wichita Falls, Texas, right? So we just opened a store there, and that was in the middle of nowhere back then, and I mean literally nowhere. And so got to learn medical school, and then showed up at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina, and became a technician on the OBGYN floor. So I was helping and assisting delivering babies for the first year of my Air Force career. And then I did well at that and did a good job. And they said, hey, we think you'd make a great EMT. So they sent me to EMT school. And I spent the next 3 years doing emergency medical technician, driving the ambulances, responding to Barrett crashes and things of that nature. So, it's, I saw a lot as an EMT, but
you met the love of your life?
I did. She was a nurse in the same hospital, and
cool.
Yeah, 39 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Very excited about it. And we are compatible beyond belief. It's unbelievable.
That's awesome.
We complement each other, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great when you find that and you found it.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, good for you. What about what happened after your military? I know you did you did some time with the Navy after that, but you're getting out, you're entering the real world. What was that transition like?
Well, when I went into the Navy, I kind of I got my bachelor's degree at the time from the University of South Carolina in business. So I always had in the back of my mind, I wanted to do something in business. So when it became obvious to me that I was going to retire from the Navy, I said, okay, let me see what I could do. And I kind of dual purposed my military career if I thought it would help my business career after the fact. So I always had in mind that I wanted to do something in business. I didn't know what, I didn't know where, but I thought, I'll put my degree to work, and it was always very interesting to me. So as I getting ready to get out, I started looking around for jobs, and again, synchronicity started happening, right? A guy that I worked with goes, I know these people over at this, they got their headquarters right here in Chesapeake, which is, right next to Norfolk where I was stationed. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, let me put you in touch with this guy. I know he's the CEO of the company. I was like, oh, holy cow. So I was talking to another guy, and he sent him my resume. I was talking to another guy at one of the commands that we were working with, and he goes, yeah, I know somebody there. He was the chief merchandising officer. He sent him my resume. So those two guys sent my resume to Steve White, who was the chief logistics officer at the time at Dollar Tree stores, and just one thing led to another. I was just chatting about getting out, thinking, oh, I wonder if there's anything local. And both of them hooked me up with this position. And again, it was the perfect position for me at the time, right? It's like everything just kind of fell in place. And I actually got to start at Dollar Tree before my official retirement date. So I got, my official retirement date is in October, and I started there in September.
Okay. And what year was that again?
That was 2006.
2006. Okay, right. And you were there for 9 years.
9 years at Dollar Tree. Yeah.
What was that like?
It was interesting because Navy logistics and retail logistics are two different animals.
Sure.
Right. But most of it's really about the people and leading people and doing things that'll help you, help the people understand where it is they're trying to go and helping them see the goals and challenge themselves to achieve those goals. But man, I'll tell you what, the systems were totally different. The focus was way more detailed than what I was used to in the military. It was like way down in the weeds, management style at Dollar Tree. Because they sold everything for $1, every penny mattered, right? And so they were so cost focused. Like you didn't do anything without basically a 1 year ROI. If you couldn't pay it back in a year, it probably wasn't going to get approved. Excuse me. But if it was a longer term type of project, maybe it would have a longer ROI. If it's going to provide those benefits for the future, like replacing old systems or things like that. But it was an experience. I did a lot more travel, believe it or not. I mean, not compared to when I was on the ships, but I had up to 5 distribution centers while I was at Dollar Tree and managing those 5 DCs across, the eastern part of the United States, traveling to each one of them every month. So there's a lot of travel, a lot of focus, got to learn about how to be very, very efficient with operations, with DC, with cost control, and focused on a lot of good things. So I think that set my basis for my retail career.
Nice. And after that, Navy Exchange for a couple of years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Navy Exchange is the military's retailer. So it's like a department store on the Navy bases. We also service the Marine Corps exchanges. So that was interesting. And I had 9 distribution centers when I was with them, plus all of transportation. So we shipped and the 9 distribution centers were all around the world. So we had 3 in Europe, 3 in Asia, and 3 in the Middle East, and then 3 in the United States. So if you add that up, that's 12, because it was 3 in Asia, 3 in Europe, including the Middle East, and then 3 in the United States. And it was kind of reverse logistics, because we would get the U.S. goods and then send them to the Navy exchanges around the world. So we were exporting. It wasn't an official export because it was U.S. goods to U.S. territory, which most of the bases are still U.S. territory. And so we were managing the flow of goods over the ocean, and once they got in country, over the ground to the facilities all around the world, Bahrain, Italy.
How much volume were you doing?
It's been a while, so I haven't thought about that in a while, but quite a bit. I mean, they were good demonstrators. I'd say we were probably $4 billion a year, $4 or $5 billion a year.
Small distribution centers?
Depending on where they were. The one in Bahrain was very small, so its range is small. The one in Guam was small, but the ones in the United States were pretty large. They were like 750 to 800,000 square feet. The one in Hawaii was very large. So depending on the country and how many military people there were in the area, it kind of determined the size of the distribution center. Okay. And usually located on a Navy base. Okay.
And then you went to Ollie's Bargain Outlet for a few years. You opened a distribution center for Ollie's.
I did. They had 2 at the time, one in York, Pennsylvania, and the other one was in Commerce, Georgia, which had opened a few years before I got there. And then their growth was very high as well. And so we opened a 3rd distribution center in Lancaster, Texas, just south of Dallas.
Okay. And that was 2018 that you went there. And then how'd you hear about Bealls? You came to Bealls in 2021.
Right. Yep. February 21. I knew of Bealls from my youth, right? And we had a Bealls store up on the corner in Largo. And so I knew of it, but it was really out of the blue. A recruiter called me up and said, hey, there's an opportunity. They're looking for a head of logistics, and would you be interested? And I said, in Florida? Yeah, absolutely. I'll take a look at it. And then once I researched the company and, I met you and Dan Love at the time. I was like, wow, looks like a great opportunity. And I was a Florida resident all the way until I retired from the Navy. And then when I retired from the Navy, I became a Virginia resident where I was living at the time. So I thought it'd be cool to become a resident of Florida again. My sisters both still live here in Florida, and my mom's also here in Florida. She now lives here in Bradenton.
What was it like when you got here? What was happening in the business, and what was the transition like?
Well, it was post-COVID, right? So COVID was a very stressful time. And at Ollie's, it was, I know it was here, and it was at Ollie's as well. It was everywhere. And so, I had taken 6 months between leaving Ollie's and accepting the position here at Bealls. And when I first got here, I was energized because I had met you. I heard about the company. I heard about, the long history. I think it was like 107 years at the time. And I thought, wow, a long sustainable company, I think it'd be a good place to be. There were a lot of neat things happening. You guys had just bought the Jacksonville Distribution Center. It was kind of underway to being furbished or outfitted with the systems that we were putting into it. And when I got here, we were just starting the Berkshire Gray installation out there. So that was kind of a neat piece of the puzzle to be a part of and see it come, basically here's where it's going to go. And from that point on, I watched it come right out of the ground and into reality.
Yeah, Ryan, you'll have to maybe add some video in at this point, but can you explain for the listeners what's happening? What are they looking at in the video as that area kind of processes merchandise?
Sure, absolutely. So we do our ticketing in a separate part of the building, but the ticketing, once an item's ticketed, it's put into those tubs that you see on the screen. And as they travel around, they go to different stations. Each one of those stations has 52 stores in that station. So the tub shows up, it tells them how many for each store. If it's 5 for this store, they'll pull 5 out and put it on these little, what we call cleats that are off to the left. And it goes in there, it rides the rails down to the carton, and then it dumps it into the carton. And then they do that back and forth between right and left. And those shuttles just keep going back and forth all day long. So the associate doesn't have to move anywhere. They stand there all day, and they basically just grab the number that it tells them and stick it in the cleat and hit a button. Grab the number it tells them, hit the cleat and hit the button. And at the time, it was our most productive process area, right? We could do a lot of units through that area. It was about 180 UPH today, and it's a pretty impressive tool that we have.
Units per hour.
Yeah.
Yep. And prior to that installation, it was not the most productive area, right?
No, it wasn't. It was a very unproductive area, right? So we were doing the ticketing, and then we were packing straight into boxes. But what's interesting about that is we just recently did the ready-to-wear change here in 817. And that ready-to-wear change, we actually de-automated it in some way, right? So we had that hang sorter. And for those that don't know what that is, you hang the clothes on these trolleys, we call them, and they travel around the DC, kind of like the Berkshire Gray system a little bit. But it's super slow. It just moves around, and it gets to the pack out station, and then they take them off the trolleys and stick them into a box. The new system that we did, the new ready-to-wear process we have, took down that entire system. And because we're now able to hang in the store, we didn't need the hang function. So what we did was simplified it, and now we ticket, we put them in carts and push them across the aisle to the pack out area, and it's super fast. And it significantly improved our productivity. And why I bring it up in conjunction with the Berkshire Gray system is the productivities are almost the same now, right? The productivity in 817's ready-to-wear is about 180 units per hour, which is the same as what we're getting out of Berkshire Gray right now. So it's definitely increased our productivity as well as give us additional capacity. So Vicente out in the DC is like, I love this thing because I don't think we're even close to pushing the limits of what we can do in ready-to-wear these days. So it gave us capability. And that used to be our bottleneck in 817 was the ready-to-wear hang sorter was the limiting factor, the biggest limiting factor we had in the DC as far as processing.
What has been the biggest adjustment for you coming into our organization and operating the distribution center and the whole logistics network, transportation? What has been kind of the biggest learning curve, would you say?
Well, the culture here is totally different, right? So, and it wasn't it was a welcome learning curve. Like, I really enjoy the culture here. The people are much more friendly and focused. The things that we do, the values, the things we've done as a leadership team, I think really make this a unique experience. But the learning curve was learning Bealls systems. And, Bealls, growing up as it has, Bealls has a different name for everything. And I had to kind of make those connections. What does that mean? What's OBR? What are all these different acronyms we use in the distribution center? And what do they mean in industry? So first thing was making all those different connections. And then the next one was understanding the processes themselves. I was never a part of a retail organization. I mean, we sold apparel at the Navy Exchange, but we didn't do the hanging. We didn't do any value added. It was simply a pass through the distribution centers. It was already taken care of for us by the vendors. So the value adds that we were doing, the ticketing and the hanging here, were a unique experience at the beginning of my career here. And, it took some time to understand, the process behind it, where are the bottlenecks and things like that. So you could look at how can you make it faster and better. So those were probably the biggest ones. And then from a network standpoint, only having 2 distribution centers and having 22 states that we're servicing, that was an eye opener. And at the time, our networks crisscrossed. We opened up Texas when I first got here. We were servicing all stores out of both DCs. So from a volume,
both Florida DCs.
Mm-hmm, well, both Florida DCs and Texas. So Texas was doing a part of the volume, but they were still sending it to all stores. So we were shipping from Texas and from Florida to every store in the network. Right. So that was a huge challenge and pretty inefficient at the time, but it was that transition phase that we were in to get to where we are today, where now we have them regionalized and they service their own set of stores, which definitely shortened the transportation pipelines, helped us lower the cost of transportation significantly. So getting it from where it was to where it is today was a unique experience. I hadn't had to do that before. So.
And then from where it is today into the future, what do you see as the biggest opportunities that we have in front of us?
I think our growth in the future, as we add more stores and we get to push the volume limits, so the volume capabilities of the DCs will be the driving factor to get to another distribution center. Making sure that distribution center then gives us a new capability or takes advantage of where we place it. So where it goes is going to be critical. Critical might be a little bit of a tougher word. It's going to be important because we can put it basically anywhere, as we've seen here, right? We got 2 distribution centers. They're not ideally positioned anywhere, but yet we still make money and we still do a lot of great things and we get all the goods out to the customer. But putting it somewhere where it's going to help our transportation network shorten the distance and the cycle time to get goods out to the stores from the distribution centers. So we're, somewhere in the Kentucky, Tennessee area. If you look at our store locations, that's probably a good starting point to say, hey, somewhere in this general area, we need to be looking for that next distribution center.
Yeah, that's it's a huge opportunity for supporting additional growth and new stores and all that. What about how do we make what we have in the existing infrastructure today work better, smarter, faster? What opportunities do we have there?
Well, this year we started a new focus. And I remember at the strategy meeting, I put it out there. I'm calling it 0 detention, 0 overtime, right?
And explain what detention is.
Detention is the money we pay for trailers sitting on our yard an extended period of time. So we'll just call it 3 days. Anything that stays on our yard more than 3 days, we start paying a daily fee for that. That's detention. We also get demurrage, which is the same thing when it sits on a port. So we pay at the port if it sits too long there. We pay detention in the DC when it sits there. And the 2 of those combined is what I call detention. So I just kind of lump them together. But one happens at the port, one happens at the DC. And, last year, we paid $5 million in overtime and detention combined. All 3 of those factors, overtime, detention, and demurrage combined, $5 million. So there's a huge opportunity there, right? There were reasons for that. The 2 hurricanes that we had and the port strike caused us to get backlogged. But this year, our focus is 0 detention and 0 overtime. With that focus, it's a mindset. So I remember at the strategy meeting, someone going, Are you saying that's what we're going to? No. It's a mindset. And I wanted to set the mindset in the DCs so that if they think about how do I get to zero detention and zero overtime? If they're always thinking about those two things, and I'm going to add one in a minute, but if they're always thinking about those two things, they're going to do things that are going to help be very efficient as far as costs are concerned. Zero detention means they got to clear that yard constantly and fast. And we need to work upstream to make sure that we're flowing it in a way that it doesn't bunch up and create a bunch of delays getting into the distribution center. So that part's going to be a big team effort across the entire corporation. But focusing on that zero detention and the zero overtime, I'm looking at that as a way to help us get through some of these hurricanes. And if we focus on not getting any overtime, meaning we're staffed or maybe even slightly overstaffed, so that we have some flexibility when we have an issue, a day that we take off for a hurricane or whatever, that we can flex up those hours and not be paying overtime. So be overstaffed to the point where I now have some additional capabilities, some additional capacity from a labor perspective to absorb some of that time. Because during peak season, we're at full capacity pretty much, right? We want to have the manpower to be slightly above that so that we have some upward capability before we start getting into overtime. Now, if we have a hurricane, we will more than likely incur some overtime, but the goal being is to minimize it as much as possible. So keeping those two focuses on those two zeros. And then the third one that I put out there is being all green, which means from an aging perspective, keeping our aging at 4 days or less, whether it be on the yard, in the building, in the outbound rack. And if we're turning that DC that fast, the place is going to fly. And so the DCs are making great strides right now towards that goal. Just for the first time since I've been here, 817 was able to get out of the red and into the yellow, and they were there for 4 days in a row. And so they're just starting to break that mold where in 4 days, the red starts at 9 days. So that's stuff that's been in our system for 9 days before it starts to go through the process area. So they're getting really good now and they're trimming that down. I mean, literally it was in the 20s and 30s when I first got here, and it stayed there for 2 years. Then we started focusing more and more attention on the aging piece and focusing on that. And if we keep that in focus, it'll start to speed up things going through the building. And it will really help us focus on the things that we need to do from a process improvement perspective to look at our system and say, man, it gets stuck when it gets to this point in the process. Let's fix that so that it flows more smoothly through it. So I think that those three focus areas are going to be really, really strategically great for us in this coming year.
For sure. Yeah. And so just backing out, 10,000 feet, your big focus is speed, it's efficiency, it's cost, and it's flow.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You nailed every single one of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what does a hurricane do to that? What does a hurricane do to the flow? Like if you can just describe for everybody in a simplistic way that people can understand, like we're going along, everything's showing up, everything's getting processed, on time, everybody's happy, flow's good. In one door, through the processing center, out the other door, out to the store, and then bam, we got a hurricane. We gotta shut down the facility. It's impacting Manatee County. What does that look like from your standpoint? What happens?
Well, the first thing we do is we take care of our people, right? And so we in anticipation of the storm actually hitting them, we give them time to prep for that storm. But as soon as they stop processing, everything else is still moving, right? The truck drivers and all the freight that's heading our way, they will push the envelope and they will still show up on the yard that day and maybe the next day. Then the hurricane hits and immediately they're back dropping stuff on our yard. So a hurricane instantly puts a whole bunch of work on the yard that we haven't had an opportunity to get to.
Because the truck drivers aren't ours, and our people have been sent home to prepare their homes and prepare their families and do all the things they need to do to secure. But the truck drivers, they don't have that level of their company doesn't have that level of
maybe they may be independent contractors.
Could be, sure.
Should be their own personal decision if that's what they want to do, because they get paid when they drop the load.
Right. So then what? So then what happens?
So then the DCs are instantly backlogged on the yard. The yard has more inventory on it than they can process. And so now, because it's peak season and we're at max capacity at that time of year, they can't dig into that, right? And so the hope is those overtime managing it and give us that staffing and giving us that opportunity to surge up some will give us some capability to bring that into the DC. So that's what we're focused on for this year. And then, like I said, once they're backlogged, if we didn't have, even that little bit, if it's a lot, if we take, say it's a big one, right, and we take 4 days off or something like that, that's 4 days worth of work. That's almost an entire week's of processing that we were doing this past year, because the DC works Monday through Thursday. We can add an overtime day of Friday, but now we're instantly in overtime. So that overtime day of Friday is overtime. We have a weekend shift, but the weekend shift wasn't very stout. So in next fiscal year, 26, we are beefing up the weekend shift so that we have 7 days of receiving capability so that we can kind of use more days to bring it into the building to give us more intake capability. We're staffing so that anytime you take a break from anything, right, it creates a backlog a little bit. And so every week we create a backlog on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because we have a very small weekend shift that unloads about anywhere from 30 to 50% of what we do during the week. And so, but the trailers keep coming. So we end up coming into Monday morning, a lot of aging on the yard. That aging in the yard turns into aging in the building because we took 3 days off from a processing perspective. And fiscal year 26, we're going to process 7 days a week. So that 7 day a week processing will give us the capability to stay current, to keep the goods moving on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and to be unloading the yard on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as well. So hopefully that gives us a fighting chance to do a lot better job with the hurricane delays that get caused.
Right. For sure. Good. Okay. Well, thank you. I'm sure that's helpful for people to understand. It's a very unique situation being a major retailer in the state of Florida.
Exactly.
with the weather that we've been experiencing down here now. For last year was brutal. It was a tough year.
Those hurricanes were only a week apart.
I know. Yeah. So we've just come off of a retreat. So as a senior team, and this is a retreat that is something that I've kind of added to the plate on an annual basis, and it's been about team building. It's been about our own growth as a senior team. It's been about culture. In order to become the best versions of ourselves that we can be, the most self-aware, we're focusing on emotional intelligence. We're focusing on personal growth and attempting to just create first off, a culture within ourselves that is a good safe place to be, and then ultimately, that spreads throughout the rest of the organization. So it's like, I think everybody kind of describes it as a very unique way of going about business, and about carrying yourself that probably most other companies out there really don't dive into. Certainly public companies, but everybody that I've talked to, everybody on our senior team says that this is completely different than anything that they've ever experienced at another company. So, what was your impression coming to Bealls and jumping on board with the retreats that we've been doing now for the last few years?
Kind of the cornerstone of the culture, I think. And you said it best, making the best version of yourself, right? And what's unique about it, from my perspective, is in other companies, you get development, but it's more technical. It's not about you as a person. It's not about, how you handle and deal with things. You get a little bit of that, but not a whole lot. And it's mostly focused on how could I be more efficient? How could I do this, right? It's not really about you. It's about, making this process or whatever more efficient. What I love about this company is we focus on the people, the individual. You focus, those meetings, we focus on ourselves and learning about ourselves, challenging ourselves, taking care of ourselves. And in doing that, it makes it a lot easier to take care of everybody around you, right? Because everybody realizes that everybody cares about the people who work here. And so I think that part of the culture is the huge difference between us and anybody else. This is the first private company I've worked for. Right. So when I first got here, I thought, well, maybe that's private, but I've talked to other folks in private companies and it's not like that anywhere else. So this is definitely a unique experience, and I'm blessed to be here.
Yeah. So coming off of the retreat, 2 days of some deep, intense, meaningful conversation, and I think some transformational change occurred amongst the leadership team. A lot of aha moments, a lot of awakenings, if you want to call it that. A lot of just kind of learning and self-exploration. What were a few of your biggest takeaways from the last 2 days that we spent together?
One of them was the focus on the ego. And you had us do that exercise where we would list the things that we're holding on to and things that we're letting go. And that was a challenge. That one got my mind clicking because I knew I was letting go of certain things and trying, so as you become aware of your ego, right? How much of your ego is driving what you do and how much of your true self is driving what you do. And so what we've learned in our experiencing and practicing is how do you get more in touch with your true self and let some of those egoic things go. The egoic things being how do you identify yourself? And that's what we call them, the identifiers, right? And so, you went through your list and that was an eye opener for me because I wouldn't have called some of those things you had on your list as identifiers. What do you identify with? Being a male. Well, I was like, whoa, that's like just who you are. But you do identify with that, right? And it does drive behaviors. And so that was a big awakening for me, was to see those things that your ego, your mental conversation, how much of that actually permeates through how you have just viewed yourself your entire life, right? And can you create some separation in those things? The other piece that I was it created a disturbance in me, to be honest. And that disturbance came from the fact that I was thinking it had to be an all or none. Keep it or lose it, right? And through the discussion, we said it's probably more of a continuum, something I'm letting go. I'm moving towards not making it a part of who I am because I choose that's the direction I want to go with that. But some of them we said we could hold on to. And I thought that was fantastic because, being an Ohio State Buckeye, I couldn't let go of that, right? And being a dad and a father and a husband, I couldn't. Those are things that are near and dear to me. So knowing that we choose who we choose those things that we want to hold on to was kind of a key factor, and that we identify those things that aren't serving us well and push those further away, right? And eventually you get to where they're not a part of your psyche or even thought pattern at all, right?
Yeah, the dad, the father, the husband, those conversations. I mean, there's two ways to look at that, and we talk through all of this, but as a role or as a function. Right. And there's a huge difference between role and function. If we're role playing dad, then oftentimes our relationship with our kids is not going to be very authentic. It's not, if we're just role playing and we're identified as a father and I know what's best for you and this is how you should behave and this constant kind of we don't have to dive too deep into it, but the function of a father, of course, that's a part of our daily lives and responsibilities.
And my first thought was, does that mean I have to get rid of that relationship or ignore the relationship? And I don't think that was it at all. I think the relationship is what you want to build out of that identification as a father.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And not necessarily, to your point, the role, the authoritarian or whatever you think that role of father would be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was an eye-opening conversation for a lot of people, I think, because people hadn't contemplated that yet from that angle. To first off say, okay, what are my identifications? What are the things that I'm identified with as an individual, as a person? And then second, to go even deeper on that was the recognition that we have the choice to either hold on to those things or to let them go, and so people, I think if you hadn't really looked inward yet to be honest with yourself about the things that we're identified as, then we wouldn't have the self-awareness to know that we have the choice. And this is something that I can carry into each new day, or this is something that I can let go of. And, for me, Gator football fan, it's mind identification. Of course I went there, but that's just, that's past. That doesn't have to be who I am today. Some of the other things, politics for me, political allegiance and You know, those sorts of things are things that I've let go of over the last several years. And so just knowing that I had the choice to do that, and knowing that that was something that I was choosing to perpetuate, and even though it produced conflict amongst people that I cared about, and even though it produced mental turbulence within my own mind, I didn't quite realize years ago that I had the choice of letting go of that. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
Right?
So
it's a choice.
It is a choice,
and that's the awakening moment for me. Was this is a choice? I don't have to do this.
Right, right.
And same thing. Political arena or whatever creates a lot of turbulence, especially these days, right? And so knowing that you have a choice, you don't have to let that happen to you.
Yeah.
And so creating that distance, creating that separation so that you can focus more on the relationship that you have with who you're talking to rather than maybe the topic or whatever the case might be.
Right, right. Yeah, it's hard to give this conversation the credit, you know, and the kind of the depth that we were able to get into on retreat in just a couple of minutes. But it was really a magical experience for me, and I know for the rest of the people in the room, just based on the closing comments and the feedback that's come back so far, that it was very powerful and very transformational. And
it's my fourth one, and they got better every time.
Yeah, awesome, great, good to hear it. Good to hear it. Well, good. Yeah, I mean, it's a great conversation. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing for Bealls. You know, I'm doing a tremendous job, of course, and it's been fun to add you onto the team and to get to know you over the last few years. So, what did we miss in this conversation, if anything?
Oh, I don't know. We've covered a lot of ground in a very short time, but I just love being with this company. I think, you know, you feel like you've been led. We talked about it at the beginning, right? And I feel like I've landed here for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I'm very happy to be a part of this team and to be that you guys chose me to head the logistics area, and I'm having a blast.
Yep.
Right? It's a lot of fun. We're learning a lot. And the growth, that unique aspect of this company just makes it all the better. Awesome.
Love it. Appreciate that. Appreciate your attitude. Appreciate, you know, your contribution to the culture and what you do for the organization. It's critical. You've got a big area of responsibility, a lot of people out there. So, you know, you've got the power to impact a lot of people in a significantly positive way. So I appreciate what you're doing for people.
Thank you.
One last question.
Sure.
If you had to guess, how long do you think we've been talking?
Oh, I'd say 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty close, I think, actually. Yeah. It's usually a time warp in here. You know, a lot of people would think 20, 25 minutes, but a lot more time has passed.
I'll tell you, the time warp we were in at the retreat taught me to say it was probably longer than I thought it was.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, we did some things and an hour went by and it felt like 10 or 15 minutes.
Right. For sure. I think it's maybe we're close to 45, 50, but either way, time flies in here, and time certainly flew on the retreat.
Sure did.
It was an amazing experience, but well, good. I appreciate you, Ray. It's good to get together, man. Good to connect, good to chat. And,
absolutely.
Great job. Keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's a wrap, Ryan. Thank you, sir.